What's going on, you guys? Today we're talking about operation on radicals. So the first thing you got to know about radicals is to simplify. So we're talking about square roots, okay? So here you want to simplify radical 72, okay? So what you want to do is break that 72 down to little numbers. So you get 2 and 36, 2 and 18, 2 and 9, which is 3 and 3. So all these little numbers, they're prime. You can't break them anymore, so you take them. And so 72 is now 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. And you remember that the radical symbol has an invisible little 2 there. That means that you're looking for two of the same numbers to take them out. So these two are the same. I can take them. This last two, he's stuck. He doesn't have another one to come with him. But I can take the threes. Okay, now these guys can come out, and each pair gives you one. So I have a two and a three. So I have two times three outside, and what's left inside is this lonely two left in there. So that gives me six radical two. Okay, let me give you guys another example on simplifying. So here I have 5 radical 54. Okay, simplify. So to simplify this, I break the 54 down. So that gives me 2 and 27. This 2 is a prime, is done. 27 is not, so I break that down to 3 and 9. 3 is done. 9 becomes 3 and 3. So now I have 5 radical of 2 times 3 times 3 times 3. Again, the square root only allows you to take two numbers. So I take these two, let me take these two. So these threes gives you a 3 outside. So I have 5 times 3 outside. And what's left inside is 2 and 3. 2 times 3. So that gives you 15, radical 6. All right, let's move on to the next step, which is to multiply. So here I have 2 radical 10 times radical 6. And when you have a radical with no number in front, there's basically a 1 outside. 1 radical 6. So you can imagine there's a 1 there. So when you multiply them, the outside multiply with the outside. 2 times 1 is 2. And the numbers inside, they can come together onto the same radical symbol. So I have 10 times 6, which could be 60, right? 10 times 6 is 60. And then you take 60 and you break that down into, 2 and 30 or whatever. But you don't want to do that. You just want to break it down from here because it's already broken down to 10 and 6. And then I break 10 down to 2 and 5. And 6 becomes what? 2 and 3. Now I can see that, oh, there are two numbers that are the same. So I have a 2 and another 2. So those guys can go out. So I have 2 and another 2 now. What's left inside is a 5 and a 3. So now I have 4 radical 15. And remember that 2 is from the one that's already outside, okay? These two inside only gives me one single 2 outside. Remember that. All right, let's try one more for multiplying. I have 3 radical 10 times negative 2 radical 5. So I have outside times outside gives you negative 6. Inside times inside is just 10 times 5. I don't want to make that 50 because I have to break it down. So I just leave that as 10, and 10 breaks down to 2 times 5. And that 5 is still there. You see how that saves me a little bit of work? Now the 5s can come out. That gives you negative 6 times 5. Inside is radical 2, which gives you negative 30 radical 2. That's the final answer. Okay, let's go on to division. here I have radical 10. Let's make that 2 radical 10 over radical 2. Again, just like with multiplying, the outside can divide by the outside, the inside can divide by the inside. So what I have is 2 divided by an invisible 1. That gives you just 2. And in the radical, I have 10 over 2, which gives you just 2 radical 5. Okay. Another example of division is if you have 12 divided by radical 3. So here, 12 is outside. It divides by the 1 outside. So that gives me just 12, right? But 12 doesn't have a radical, so there's nothing here. So I can't divide by radical 3. So there's nothing I can do there. So I can't divide that. Okay, so you cannot divide that. But the problem here is that you can't have a radical at the bottom. So what you do is you have to get rid of the radical at the bottom by multiplying by something that can get rid of the radical. So if I want to take the 3 outside the radical, I need another radical 3 inside. So then I do the same thing to the top, which gives me 12 radical 3 on top. And the bottom, I have radical 3 times 3. And you guys see how now I have a pair of numbers that I can take out, which gives you 12 radical 3 over 3. Now, the 3 is outside, the 12 is outside. They can divide. That means that I have 4 radical 3 left. That's the final answer. Okay, one last thing is going to be add and subtract. And these can go together because they're the same thing. Okay, so the first thing I have is negative 2 radical 12 plus radical 12. So remember again, if you have a radical and no number in front, there's an invisible little 1 there. Okay, so think about it this way. A radical 12 is some weird number. We don't know what it is, but it's a weird number. I have 2 of that, or negative 2 of that number. Now I add 1 of that number. So it's basically just like a negative 2. Think of it like a negative 2x plus 1x. Okay, so because the radical 12 is like an unknown, treat it like a variable. So if you have negative 2x plus x, now you have negative x, right? So here you have negative 2 radical 12 plus 1 radical 12 gives you negative radical 12. Okay, because you have negative 2 of something, you add 1 to that something, you have now negative 1 of that thing. And that thing is radical 12. And here, the last thing you have to do is simplify. You always have to simplify. So the 12, break it down to 2 times 6, which is 2 times 3. So that gives you negative radical 2 times 2 times 3. And I do have a pair, so that comes out. I have negative 2 radical 3. Ooh. All right, one last example before we're finished. So I have 3 radical 5 plus radical 20. Okay, so here I have 3 of a number plus 1 of a different number. I can't combine that. That's like saying I have 3x plus y. X and y are different. It's different from this problem because they're both radical 12. This one's radical 5 and radical 20. They're different things. So I can't add them. There's nothing I can do. No, except maybe I can simplify this to see if it looks like that guy. So radical 20 can be broken down. So let me rewrite this again. But now radical 20 is just 2 times 2 times 5, right? Because 20 breaks down to 4 times 5. And here, these 2's come out. So now I have 3 radical 5 plus 2 radical 5 left inside. So they're both the same radicals. So I can add them. So 3 of that plus 2 of that gives me 5 of that. So I have 5 radical 5. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment below.